In this video, we're going to create a multi-camera setup example for your games. Now, I'll admit, what we're going to actually build here is probably not the most useful thing you've ever seen, but it will get several different points across as to how you could set up a similar camera system for your actual games. What we're going to do is have one camera whose sole purpose in life is to render out our HUD. We're going to have another camera whose sole purpose is to render out everything up to 20 meters away from the player. And then a third camera whose job it is to render everything beyond that. And we're going to make some changes in between what each one of those cameras can and can't see, just to kind of drive the point home of how you could use a setup like this to control where objects become visible in your level. So let's go ahead and get started. We already have a main camera attached to our first-person controller, and we can make use of that. That will become our near camera. As a matter of fact, I'm going to select our main camera, press F2, and we'll call this the near camera. It doesn't necessarily have to be named main camera. We can name it anything we want. Now let's set up our HUD camera. Now to do this, I'm just going to go under my hierarchy panel and choose Create, and we'll make a brand new camera. And at first, well actually, not even at first, just in general, it does not matter where this camera goes. We can put this anywhere in our level for what we have in mind. So I'm going to take its position X, Y, and Z, and we're going to zero those out. Now, what can we use for a HUD, Lee?
How about we use a little bit of text and maybe a cube?
Okay, I can do that. So let's see here. Let's start off with our little bit of text. Now, you might be tempted to jump up to the GUI text because, you know, graphic user interface text. It makes sense, but that's not what we're going to be using for this.
Right. The GUI text is drawn above all the cameras. All the camera stuff gets rendered out first, then GUI text gets drawn on top of it. And because we want our camera to actually be drawing stuff, it's not going to work in this case. So we need to use the 3D text as opposed to any of the GUI stuff.
Okay, so we'll select 3D text, and just like we did with our other camera, which I need to name that camera before I do anything else, let's go ahead and press F2, and I'll call this our HUD camera. And then we can take our new text, and I'll just simply name this our HUD text. Now currently, this says Hello World, and we can make that look a whole lot cooler. I don't know, what should we have this say? Let's just say Test HUD for now. We'll make it look a lot cooler here in just a moment. Now, I'm going to take the transforms for this 3D text, and we'll zero these out as well. And if we come over to our hierarchy view, mouse over our viewport, we can tap F and fly over to it. So now you can see it's in the same location as our camera. Now, if I select our HUD camera, I can actually see the text starting to show through in the corner.
Right. Now, the quality of this text isn't the best right now because of just some of the rendering artifacts. We can actually spend time cleaning it up, but this is just an example, so we're not really going to get too much into it.
Right.
So let's go ahead and click on that text for now. And let's set its anchor to middle center and its alignment to left.
Anchor to middle center, alignment to left.
Or sorry, alignment to center. My bad.
Okay.
I was reading what it said.
I figured you were looking at what was on the screen and just going with it.
Yep. Still select on the the HUD test. Go ahead and change the character size down to 0.25.
Okay.
And then let's click on the HUD camera. See what we've got. Let's move it up towards the top of the screen.
Okay.
So this is just a little bit of tweaking to make sure that it gets up towards the top. All right.
I wonder something. I doubt this will actually work, but I thought I'd test. No, it does work. Check it out.
Nice.
If we lock our inspector, then our camera preview will stay put, so we don't have to do all this jumping back and forth, and we can position this exactly where we want it to be.
So with that, let's select on the HUD test, and let's size it down a little bit more as well.
Okay.
So we're going to have to unlock it.
Yeah, we are.
And then change it down to, say, 0.1.
Okay.
And then let's verify what it looks like. So it's kind of small, but it should be a little bit crisper.
Yeah, it should look better when we actually play through our level.
Right. Now what I want to do is let's create a cube.
Okay.
And what I want to do is kind of elongate it, almost like a weapon barrel.
Okay, so like a gun in a first-person shooter.
Now let's position it in front of the camera, kind of an angle, like a gun would be. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is just to get a point across.
As a matter of fact, let's start being smart about how we do this. We could take our HUD text and parent it to the camera. We can take our cube and also parent that to the HUD camera. Let's rename this to weapon. And then, now that we've done that, we can make sure that our weapon is positioned.
You're locked.
If we unlock, we can take our numbers, zero them out. That's a good place to start. Grab the HUD camera, go ahead and relock, and now we can position this box a little more carefully. So we could, well, let's try rotating it in a little bit, rotating it up a little bit, tweak the scale a little bit more. So something about like that.
Right. Now, like I said, this is just mostly for experimenting. Now, let's create a layer. And this layer we're going to call, say, HUD layer.
Oh yeah, we need to unlock the inspector to be able to do that. So we'll take user layer 9 and we'll call this the HUD layer. And I imagine we're going to need to assign all of our objects here to the HUD layer, being our weapon object and our HUD text as well. So we'll select both of these and go under layer, make sure these are assigned to the HUD layer.
And I think it will only take the first one you selected. So you verify that? Yep.
Yep, you're right.
All right, so now both of those objects are selected to HUD layer. Let's go back to our HUD camera. We're going to check its culling mask, and we're going to make sure that the only thing that it's going to render is things in the HUD layer. So we'll select nothing, but deselect everything else.
Yep, select nothing, then select HUD layer. And now we can actually see kind of what's happening here. We see the test HUD, and then in the background we see the skybox.
Right, now we need to set our clear flags. So if we set these to depth only, what we see is the only thing that's get rendered are things that we've set in our HUD layer.
Right, which is the objects that have depth, meaning this 3D text and this weapon. Everything else isn't rendering at all. Now, I'm going to take this HUD camera, and I'm going to parent this to our near camera. I'm also going to take my near camera, make sure, and we need to start kind of taking account of depth here, and think about the order in which these cameras are going to be rendering. Now, our near camera is technically going to be the second thing to render. You need to think of this in terms of starting it far away and then getting close. We haven't made our far camera yet.
Right.
That's coming. We'll draw a far camera result first, then our near camera, and then our HUD on top of that. So we'll start off by taking the depth of our near camera, and I'm going to set that to 1.
All right. And now our HUD camera needs to draw on top of that, so its depth has to be a higher number yet.
So we'll set that to 2.
So do you want to test it and see what happens?
We should be able to test it just fine. So now if we hit play.
Now the neat thing is walk up to something where our gun would normally pass through.
That's right. And we never see that gun actually pass through. Even though this technically should be sticking out in front of the player, we never actually see that.
Right. Now the trick with this is you could put in your own weapon model that is animated. So you could show cartridges being expended.
Yeah, it could have its own
reload.
particle systems and muzzle flare and all kinds of things like that. It could trigger off sound effects, all kinds of great stuff. Now, let's set up the difference between our near cam and our far cam. So I'm going to close out of here, stop playing. Let's focus our attention on our near camera for just a moment. Now, to turn this into a near camera, I'm going to take our far clipping plane and pull it all the way back to 20, so that now when I play, everything beyond 20 meters ceases to exist, which is a little scary. I'm also incidentally going to take the skybox that we created in the last video, and we'll go ahead and remove that.
Right. Well, we're also going to have to adjust the clear flags for this camera as well.
We will. We'll do that here in just a moment. So let's go ahead and get our far camera in place. So we'll create a brand new camera, and let's go ahead and name it. So press F2. We'll call this far camera. And let's get this parented to the near camera as well. And there we are. Now, this far camera is going to be a little bit different. First off, we need to make sure it's in the same place as the near camera. So now that it's parented, we can take its transforms and just zero them all out. So 0, 0, 0. And make sure, since it has no rotation, it should be oriented in the exact same direction as well.
We can verify that by clicking on the near camera and looking at its settings.
And its position is 9.07. Yeah, everything should be just fine. Now, we need to change a few things here. Now, currently, this camera its depth is currently set to 0. So we're drawing this way behind everything. Now, that's okay. That should be just fine. Let's go ahead and hit play and see what we've got. And we still have the problem of the skybox getting in the way. That's because our near camera is currently set to draw back to the skybox. Once we get to the end of our far clipping plane, that camera says, all right, we've reached the end of our frustum, time for the skybox. We can't have that. What we need for our near camera is to say, once we get to the end of our depth, we're just going to show only those objects in our depth. Everything else really will cease to exist. Now, the other part of this, though, is our far camera doesn't need to be showing anything nearer than 20 meters. So you got to think of this like a layered effect. We have our far camera showing from 20 meters out into the distance. We have our near camera showing from 0.3 meters up to 20 meters. And on top of that, we have our HUD. So now let's hit play, and suddenly everything comes back. We have two cameras that are rendering our environment right now. And off the top of your head, you're probably wondering, why would you ever want to do that? Because if you're just setting it up like this, it's purely academic and it's a little bit useless. But let's say you've got a game where you've got a lot of different objects that are scattered across the ground, things like debris, or objects that aren't necessarily important if you're far away from them. You don't want them to render. You want to be able to control that. Well, you can use your culling mask to control whether or not you see those things at any one of these cameras. So for instance, we could take our near camera, grab its culling mask, and make sure that it can see the campsite layer. But take our far camera, jump into its culling masks, and make sure that it cannot see the campsite layer. Now this is a really hardcore, kind of over-the-top example, but it will get the point across. So now when we hit play, if we take a look, everything is fine, but as we back up, we lose the campsite. Now imagine this wasn't just the campsite. Imagine this was all kinds of extra little debris and stuff that is nice when you're up close to it, but is not important when you're far away. Now you can make that detail disappear based on the player's depth from the camera.
Right, and if the camera's not drawing it, you're not wasting cycles rendering out information that's too far away to actually be made out. Especially if the stuff back there had particle systems, animation.
Which it does.
Yep, all of this stuff is not going to be rendered by that camera.
Right. And that just keeps things nice and light on your machine, or it helps keep things nice and light. So this is a quick run-through of an example multi-camera system, just to kind of drive home the point that when you're setting up your game, you don't need to think of it as one camera for one player. You can use multiple cameras to make all kinds of things happen in your scene. In fact, if you really wanted to, you could differentiate between our actual HUD, have another camera for your weapon, and then if you really wanted to, you could have multiple stages of distance just by expanding on what we've got here and control what objects are visible at each range of those. So that is going to wrap things up for this example. It's also going to wrap up this section on cameras. So I hope you've pulled some useful stuff out of this. This is stuff that you really need to get to know. In some upcoming videos from 3D Buzz, you're going to see how you can incorporate some deeper levels of camera control to give the effect of, say, a 3D platformer game or kind of the quintessential MMO camera. Now, a lot of that doesn't have to do with necessarily the camera settings so much as moving that camera around through your scene. Right,
and one of the cool things about it is with most cameras, you have to interact with your environment. Even in this example, as you run into trees or objects, you can actually pass the camera through it. You can't see it so much with a first person other than when we were walking up to a tree. And a third person camera where the camera is free and you can orbit it around, if you don't take the environment into consideration, you can have your camera pass through the ground, through a building, through a tree, through another player. So all of this has to be taken into consideration while you're moving the camera around.
That's right.
And this stuff can be very, very tricky to do. In one of our sets, we'll actually teach you how to deal with that type of camera system.
That's right. And all that kind of stuff will be useful if you are interested in taking part in our upcoming MMO class, which we're going to be offering for member sponsor subscribers over on 3D Buzz. It's a very limited seat class, but it's going to be teaching a lot of high-end concepts in Unity. and it will be relying on a lot of existing Unity knowledge. So make sure you get this stuff as locked down as you possibly can. But unless you have anything else you want to add in, Lee.
No, I think that's good for this set of videos.
All right, so that is going to wrap things up for this video. Thanks a lot for watching.